In today's video, we want to discuss how to paint skin tone with watercolor and what we should be doing to prep our palette and the things that we can do. Here's one example where I've already painted in the skin tone and you can see what I've got going on there. Then I've got another example where I've started that and we'll continue working on that. To begin with, we're going to check out our palette. One of the things we need to do within watercolor painting is make sure that we add lots of layers. With our washes, we didn't do many layers. We did a lot of thick, heavy paint to create some interesting techniques, but now we want to focus on making sure that we create layers of paint to show the subtlety and depth of things. So as we do watercolor painting, we need to think about beginning with the lighter values and then slowly adding in darker values as we create layers of paint. What this does is creates a glaze. A glaze in watercolor painting is just multiple layers of transparent paint, which really gives a lot of the color to our paintings. So what I'm going to do to begin with is I'm going to take my clean brush, I'm going to put it in my clean water, and I'm going to kind of activate just a couple of colors. I'm going to need some red, so I'm just going to put some of my wet brush on some of that red, then clean off my brush, get some clean water, and put a little bit of water on top of my orange. I'm not really pulling into my palette, as you can see. Changing that up, clean off the brush, some clean water, activate my yellow, clean that off, get some clean water. I'm going to activate my blue. So activating your paints is just putting a little bit of water on there so it's easier to pick it up later on. This process might feel a little different than what you've done before. So for my skin tones, I want to create a couple of colors, and how I'm going to do that is different than what you pulled before. I'm going to take my brush that has some water in it. I'm going to go to that first color I activated, which was my red. And you'll see I'm just going to kind of pick up some of this red, and then I'm going to put it in this section. You can see I don't have water inside of it yet. I'm just kind of throwing some red inside of there. Clean off my brush, and I'm alright to water down my paints. I actually want that because a glaze means transparent, which means we have a lot of water inside of it. So just using a little bit of that water, it's reddish water, so I'm not going to stress out too much. But that's about all the red I'm going to pull from my palette, or from my cakes. So the first thing I'm trying to create is a red-orange. Now instead of actually using orange, because this orange is so bright, I know I activated it, but I'm going to use it for something else. So I'm going to clean off my brush, make sure I get a little bit of clean water on there, and then go right into my yellow. And I'm just going to pull one brush full of yellow, and then add that to this. Notice I'm going to keep adding some water to this. Grab just a little bit more red. There, that's the color I'm going for. Okay. Now, I still feel like that's a pretty dark color. I'm going to bring some of this over here. Not one part's really saturated. Let's see how we're just going to keep watering down this color. And then if I need to pull more color, I can do so from right there. So I've kind of got a good base color, and then the color I want to actually paint with for my glaze. So this has created a red-orange just by adding a little bit of yellow. Next, I am going to take this orange. I need to create a yellow-orange. To begin with, though, I'm just going to put some orange inside of my container right here that I got from my palette. Start adding in that orange. Lots of water here. Remember, we're creating a glaze, which is a lot lighter and a lot more transparent. So I haven't added in any other darker colors to my clean water cup, so I feel okay pulling from there. And then I'm going to go to the yellow, and this is where I'm going to pull some yellow. Making sure I had no orange in my brush so that I went to get yellow, that it did not create orange in my yellow container. So there's my yellow-orange. I feel like that's a good color. But I do need to water down a lot of this as well. So I'm just going to pull some of the color from here. And I'm going to create that. Nice yellow-orange created that is quite transparent. Okay. Now I'm going to make one more color, clean out my brush. I'm going to get a little bit more orange here. The next color I'm trying to create is a brownish neutral. This is going to be for the shadows on my face. So to kill some of that orange, I'm putting in a little bit of blue. Notice the amount of blue I put in is not very heavy, right? Not very heavy. We want to do just a little bit of blue in there and not do a ton. If you do too much blue, it's going to just turn blue. You want to be careful with having it just be blue. So then, as you can see, I'm going to water down. So I still do the pulling method, where I'm pulling water into my colors, but I made sure that I have some very, very watered down colors that I can use for my glazes. So now that I've got those colors, I've got some clean water, I've got my dirty water cup. As you can see, I also have my portrait here. So glazing in layers is really about just adding more layers of this color. I have already started with one of these. You can see I've already done my red-orange. You can see as I lay this on there, it just is adding a little bit more color to some of those areas. It might be harder to pick up on the camera, but you can notice that that is starting to happen. Okay, so I've done my layer of red-orange, and I do want to kind of take in, and I've let it dry. I touch this, it feels dry to the touch. So I'm going to take my yellow-orange, and you can kind of see that color lay down. It looks pretty yellow, but then as I start to paint it out, you can kind of see the color shift that starts to happen. It's very subtle. That's what you want. That glazing is keeping that red underneath. I have a very red kind of skin tone at times, so I wanted to make sure I had that on there. And in these lighter areas, I'm not making it quite as thick. And you can see I went a little thicker over here where there's going to be some more shadow. And you can see just pulling those colors as I add in these layers. Watercolor is about layers. There's a reason we talk about layers with colored pencil, because you're going to do layers in watercolor, you're going to do layers in acrylic paint. I'm going to move my paper so it's a little easier to work with. Careful not to dip your hand in where you've already painted. I want to spread that color around. Picking up some of this glaze for this yellow. Keep trying to create that peach tone. Now I've looked at my picture and I do have a bit of a highlight on my forehead, so I'm not going to go super intense with the color right here, because I eventually want to just keep that lighter. And because in watercolor we have to move lighter to darker, I can't really make that color lighter if I've painted on it. So I'm just going to leave a little bit of lightness there. So I'm just going in, focusing on that skin tone. Some of you may realize that you've got a little bit of a empty side where you don't have your face framed, so you're going to have to decide where your face is and how that's going to look. Sometimes I lightly draw in with pencil so I can erase it later. You just don't want so much graphite that you can't erase it, and you don't want to end up blending in graphite to your watercolors. I also have a highlight on my chin, so right underneath where my mouth is, I'm going to keep that color, but then leave a little bit of a highlight right there. You kind of see where I'm leaving that. I know these are very subtle changes because of the amount of color we're using, but you can see kind of layering in that color, and that's slowly getting more color for us.